for joining us. So we're going to talk about cooking with dried beans tonight. So as Emily said, it can be intimidating, and I haven't cooked with dried beans too much myself, but it was something I was really excited to learn more about. And especially working at the co-op, I see all of the beans we have for sale in bulk, and I see all the beans we have for sale in the grocery aisles, in cans and bags. So it's something that I tried out myself. So thank you for joining us. Hi. As Emily said, please feel free to ask any questions along the way. You can type it into the chat or wave at us, and we'll get to you. So this is a picture here of a 32 bean mix soup, and this is actually something we sell at the co-op. And the picture on the left is just a really zoomed in version. It's just beautiful. There's tons of different beans, and I think it's really neat. Okay, so then I wanted to kind of open up with how you guys have eaten beans before. So if anyone wants to add in how they have eaten beans before, or I can name some things as well. Emily?
I'll share something. So my family, we love to make a big pot of pinto beans on the weekend, and we'll usually put in like some tomatillos and maybe some cumin and maybe jalapeno, make them like a little bit spicy, and then we'll eat them a couple different ways throughout the week. And so like one night we'll have it on rice, and the next night maybe we'll have them as beef burritos, and maybe the next night when there's a little bit left, you can stretch that and make nachos. And so I really love just the versatility of them and being able to stretch it into a couple of different meals, and it's really economical that way. I'm also seeing in the chat that Marianne says she loves making soups and stews with them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That's great. So I definitely have had them mainly for like dinner or a side dish myself. I love baked beans. So that's one thing that I would be really interested in learning how to make as well, because the can mix is great. A lot of cans have higher sodium in them. So it's another neat way to add your own flavoring or take out some of the salt if you'd like. You can also make them vegetarian. A lot of them have bacon in them. I would keep the bacon myself, but you could do whatever you would like. And then also another fun way you can eat them is for dessert. So in one of my previous classes, we made a black bean and avocado brownie. And I know my mom, for example, has also made a dessert with, I think it was black beans or chickpeas. So they're just really fun. They're very versatile. You can have them for any meal and dress them up how you'd like. Make them more spicy or less spicy. So we'll keep going. So the next thing I want to talk about is just how we purchase beans. So at the co-op, you can buy them in bulk, which is where I see them the most. There's a huge wall of really beautiful different colored beans. And I like this because you can buy any size that you'd like. So if you're just starting out and you want to just buy a cup of beans, it's really great. You can do that, or you can try a couple different kinds. So we have on the bottom picture there, we do have some beans pre-bagged. So the price is all on them. And actually the bulk department is really great because the sticker on the front says how to cook the beans. So for example, I bought the navy beans, and it says right on there that you cook them for 1 to 2 hours, and it tells you how much water to add and everything. So it's really nice. And then we also have them in the bulk section. Like I said, we have bags, paper bags and plastic bags and plastic tubs. You can fill them up right there. And then as the top picture shows, there is a whole bunch of canned beans. So we have some that are just plain. We have some that also have salt added. And the front of the can is not going to say salt added. it's just going to say black beans. So if you look on the back of the can, you'll see ingredients listed and it'll say black beans and salt. So if you're looking for something that does not have that, you'll just have to look at the front of the can and it'll say low sodium or no salt added. And I think that's really a good thing to notice for ingredient wise. And in bulk, you know exactly what it is. It's right on the front. We also have cans and boxes and bags of all different soup mixes. There's lentil soups. There's Bob's Red Mill has a 13 bean soup mix already bagged up. So that's a fun way if you're just getting into dried beans and you're not really sure how to season them yourself or what to add. It'll tell you right on the back of the bag what to add. And then I added, is there a bag in the back of your pantry that you don't make eye contact with? Because that's what I've heard from a lot of coworkers and friends and probably myself one day, where you buy the beans with high hopes and then you're just not really sure what to do and they set. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the other fun thing you can do is you can grow your own beans. So that's a fun way to get started, and it's really satisfying to know that you started it from the ground up, know exactly where it came from, and you know when it was harvested, so you know how fresh it is. Okay? And please feel free to add anything you would like, or if you have a personal experience growing beans or buying them or bag in the back of your pantry.
I like that you mentioned the bag in the back of the pantry, because there was like a New York Times article recently that was talking about pandemic beans and how one of the things that people brought up in their early pandemic shopping panic, people bought lots of dried beans, but then they didn't necessarily know what to do with them. And so there's a whole lot of people with pandemic beans in their pantry still just sitting there that they don't yet know what to do with. So I was hoping some of those folks might be on our call tonight and get inspired by their pandemic beans.
That's what I heard from a lot of coworkers too who work in grocery. They said people have just been buying beans like crazy, cans, whole cases, because also at the co-op you can buy a whole case of beans, for example, and you can get a 15% discount, which is very fun.
And they store pretty well, right? So if you bought a big bag of them and you had like a 5-gallon bucket with a lid, they would last what, like a year?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a good idea.
Okay, and here we have a picture of some of the beans that we sell in bulk. We just got back to bring your own container as well. So if there's any time you want to bring in your own container or bag or bottle, we can help you fill it up. So here's another one. You can see we're out of stock of the cannellini beans, or we were. Those are really popular as well. We have split peas. We have the black-eyed peas and yellow-eyed peas. Garbanzo beans, which are also chickpeas. That might be the next thing that I would like to try. I think that sounds really fun. Kidney beans, which you'll see a lot in chili. Navy beans, which are the ones that I just purchased, the little white ones. And then we have black beans. And here are some more. And these ones will cook a little bit differently, the lentils and mung beans. Okay, so here we have benefits of shopping in bulk. So I really enjoy shopping in bulk. I did not do very much of it before I started working at the co-op, but now it's just opened my eyes to how you can buy just what you would like and it doesn't go to waste. And if you're cooking beans, for example, you can make one batch and then stretch it for the rest of the week, which is really neat. Kind of gives you your own creative twist, whether you're meal planning or not. And they're very fresh. So the bulk department, if you ever see them working, they're always filling the bins. We're always running out of this, that, or the other. So you know that they're pretty fresh. There's less packaging, so you don't have the can that you're opening. And when you make your own beans, it's a better texture and more flavor. It's nice and fresh. It's like a little, I think I've heard people describe it as like a little pillowy packet of flavor. And so here's some of the beans that we're selling in bags. And this is how to shop in bulk. I'm not sure if everyone here has shopped in our bulk department, but don't be intimidated. We definitely would love to help you. There's somebody around 24/7, whoever it is. We have a little scale right on the counter, so you can place your container down and you can get the weight of it. And then you can fill it up to however much you'd like. And then we have an item number, so all of the beans will have a number, and then you'll just write that on the front. And like I wrote on here, I write the name down because sometimes I get home, for example, if I buy bulk spices and I don't know what the spice is. So sometimes it's helpful to write the type of thing that you bought as well.
We get so many calls about that at the co-op where people have discovered something in their pantry and it has this number on it but no other labeling. And because it happens with such frequency, there's now a tool on our webpage. When you click bulk on the Middlebury.coop webpage, you'll see something called a PLU checker. And you can type in the number on your mystery bag and it will tell you what's in there. And when we asked our web developers in Burlington to add this tool to our webpage, they were so puzzled. They were like, what is this? Why do you need it? And I realized it's one of those things that only if you shop in bulk or shop at a co-op would that even be something you need. But it gets a lot of use.
That just happened to me. I found pumpkin pie spice in my pantry, but I didn't know what it was. I had to go to the bulk department and find out which PLU it was.
Happens a lot.
Okay. So then I'm just going to talk a little bit about canned beans versus dried beans. So this is a little comparison of how much you get in a can versus how much you could buy with your own container, for example, of dried beans. So 1 can of beans, our cans are about 15 ounces. There are some that are larger towards the bottom of the shelf. And so that's just under 1 pound. And that costs approximately $1.49 per pound. This comparison, I was using the black bean. And you get about just under 2 cups of cooked black beans out of that can. And then if you bought a cup of dried beans, and then we have over here, oh, I'm hiding the screen here, 1 pound of dried beans, so that's 16 ounces, so the same thing, and it costs $2.29 per pound. We also have bags over in the grocery department that are $2.99 per bag, and they are 2 pounds of beans. So there's lots of different ways you can get them. But then once you cook those dried beans, you're actually going to get triple the amount that you had before. So when I cooked my 1 pound of navy beans, they actually expanded when I soaked them to over 2 cups. And then when you cook them, it's even more, and you get all that really good liquid and broth in there as well. Okay. So now we're going to talk about where else you have seen beans in the store and how else they're used. And this helped me when I was going around the store look at different ways you could use your own beans. Let's say you made a big pot, like Emily said, and then you're trying to figure out how to cook them. So my first thought was salsa, because I personally love black bean and corn salsa, and we were actually sold out. It was gone off the shelf. It was one of the only ones, so I thought that was interesting. We have a bunch of burritos. The burritos are all frozen, but that's another way that you could make meals for the week. or even longer. You can freeze them. It's great for families. If you have someone who is vegetarian, you could just make some vegetarian ones and freeze them. We have a lot of coworkers who eat them for lunch.
I was going to say that I've tried that before, making a big pot of black beans and rolling them up in a tortilla and then rolling that up in foil and then putting those foil wrapped burritos into a Ziploc bag and freezing them. And like they were way better than a store-bought bean burrito, and I spent a fraction of the cost on them. So it's one of those things I've been meaning to do again, and now I'm feeling inspired to give it another try.
I'd like to too. I think it's fun. All right. And then we have the snack aisle. So this is why I wanted to buy chickpeas, because you can roast your own and you can add whatever seasoning you would like. And we sell bean chips in the store. And I saw today too, when I was working grocery, we sell black bean spaghetti and chickpea spaghetti, and there are a couple other ones. So it's really everywhere. We also sell them frozen. So here's another example. It's a 10-ounce bag, and it was $2. And that has no liquid, no nothing in it. It's just the beans. And you can imagine that the flavor would be a little different because they're cooked and then they're frozen and then they're just sitting in the freezer. So when you make yours at home, you'll be able to add a whole bunch of different flavors, and you get the really nice liquid that goes along with it too. And then we have 32 bean mix. And this I thought would be really fun. You can make gifts with them. So we have a couple that we sell in the store, the 13 bean and the split pea soup mix. But then you can make your own. And you can do this with a variety of different recipes or ingredients. You could add noodles to make it like a chicken noodle soup. Beans are really popular right now, and especially with shopping being limited, going out to the store limited, it's a really fun way to drop off a gift for a friend. It's not going to go bad. They can add their own ingredients to it too. And you see the one on the bottom, the split pea, on the bottom it says add bacon or ham. So they'll give you suggestions and other fun ways to add your own.
Here goes those mason jars again.
So then how many beans do I need? So it's about a 1-to-3 ratio. In this picture, it came out to 2.5 cups of cooked beans, but 1 cup of dried will be about 3 cups of cooked. So they really expand. I saw this when I was cooking my own. I had to keep adding some water to the pot because I didn't add enough. And then again, the comparison of how much you get if you just bought 1 can of beans. We only get about 1 3/4 cups of cooked beans. And here's another picture of the navy beans on the left, black beans on the right. They do change color a little bit too, which is neat. Okay, benefits of beans to your diet. So it's very healthy. It's a nice way to stay full and satisfied. You can control the sodium in them too, which I think is really nice. And they're supposed to be very heart healthy, so you'll hear that a lot. They can kind of help bind the cholesterol and whatnot. So heart healthy food, very good fiber. And what kind of beans do I use? So there's tons of different kinds, and they're all based on what you would like. You could do kidney beans, pinto beans, and almost anything. You'll see them in a lot of specific dishes, but feel free to try it out and see what you like. And you can make them, you can cook them less or more depending on what recipe you're using. So here's just a couple of examples. So for a salad, casserole, or baked beans, here's some beans that would be good to use for those options. And then to add creaminess, you'll use different beans. We sold a black bean dip at work. That was really good, and that was with black beans. Lentils and split peas would make a really nice creaminess as well. And this I got off online from the Spruce. It's just a nice little visual on how to cook them. And this is something I've been thinking about just cutting out and putting by my fridge, just to think about it. Okay, so now we're going to get into how to cook them. So the first thing you'll do once you pick out how many beans you would like is to rinse them. You'll definitely want to go through, probably if you bought a bag of them off the grocery shelf, it might be a little bit more likely to have, like in the picture, there's a little pebble or there could be a piece of a shell. In the bulk department, I think they're really good at looking things over as they're packaging, but it's just best to rinse them and go through them. And you'll want to pick out any damaged beans or any dry looking ones, and this will ensure that they cook evenly.
I've noticed that sometimes when I'm soaking mine, some of the damaged ones tend to float. And so I've noticed that's a good time to kind of skim off some that I might have missed when I was kind of looking through them before soaking.
Yep, that's a really good idea. I noticed that with some of mine as well. The water covered most of the navy beans, but then some floated up to the top and you could see just a piece of the shell or half of a bean, and you can cook them the half a bean if you'd like, but then they might tend to burst. So then soaking them. There is a big debate on whether you should soak your beans overnight. So I did, just to try it out. It definitely took a little bit of planning out. This is a picture showing how much the beans expand. So I did at least 2 or 3 inches of water over the beans. It depends what size pot you use, but you'll want a couple inches because they will soak up quite a bit of the water. And the great soak debate. So I've had a lot of friends and coworkers say that they're interested in cooking dried beans, but they don't have time. They aren't going to plan it out, and that's okay because you don't necessarily have to soak them overnight. So it could just be for a couple hours. If you wanted to start soaking them half day, it's just room temperature water, just right on your counter there is fine, or you can put them in the fridge, but you don't have to soak them. So you can do the quick soak method. And this is what I hear a lot of people actually use, and it works fine. So you'll put your beans, after you've rinsed them and sifted through them as well, you'll put them in a pot and cover it with water, and then you're just gonna get them to a boil. So then you're gonna boil it for a couple minutes, and then remove them from heat and keep a cover on and let it set for about an hour. Oh, and you'll want to use new water. That was an interesting fact that I read, that helps take away some of the musical aspects of the beans. And so whatever method you want to use, it's a good idea to soak them and then get rid of that water. And that'll also help take away any pieces of shell or damaged beans or anything as well. And then you'll add new water when you go to cook your beans.
Another tip that I like for making beans more digestible and helping with that musical bit is we sell in the co-op in the international foods aisle something called kombu, Kombu, and it's a seaweed. And if you cut a little piece of that and boil it with your beans, it has enzymes in it that help make the beans more digestible and help with the gassy factor. And I've even noticed on some canned beans, when I'm looking at the ingredients list, I'll see kombu on their ingredients list. or it'll, seaweed, or sometimes it'll just say enzyme, and basically it's my favorite hack for making sure that beans don't make my family too gassy.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. How did you spell it?
KONBU.
Oh.
Konbu. I'll type it into the chat.
Okay. That's a great idea. Okay. So now that we've done that, we've rinsed, we've added new water. Now we're going to, the cover is not necessarily for covering the pot. You can, but it's just for covering the beans with enough water. So we have a handy bean guide that we're gonna try to send you guys. We'll figure out a way to send it to you, but we also have it at the co-op. So anytime you wanted to come in, we can give you this guide, and it's just per 1 cup of bean for each variety. We have how much water they take, how much time it takes to cook, and then how many cups of beans you'll actually get out of this. So anytime you come in, we'll actually have that on each of the packages as well.
And maybe I'll email that to everyone after class.
Okay.
If you guys if you are interested in this very handy little bean soaking and cooking guide, just pop your email into the chat and I'll send that. Emily's holding it up there, and for some reason we were struggling to get it to load into the presentation, but I'll email it to you if you're interested.
It's very handy. I think I'm going to cut it out and put it on my fridge as well. Just a nice, quick guide, because you can always look it up online how many hours to cook them, or just try it out and set timers yourself. But this is a nice way to plan ahead too. Then we're gonna simmer the beans. So we don't want to really high boil because that can cause them to burst. But you're just gonna simmer it. You'll bring it up to a boil first, and then turn it back down. And this is a really nice way to get everything cooked evenly, and they take some time. So it's definitely a slow cooking food. It's very satisfying. All right, so now we have some ideas for seasoning. And feel free to add in if you guys have any favorite ways to season your beans or favorite dishes. Love to hear them. So I added bay leaves and garlic at first because I wasn't sure what to add specifically to my navy beans. And you can also do onion, carrots, or celery. And then for salt, that's another kind of debatable of when to add it. There's a lot of recipes that will ask you to add salt right at the beginning. And that's fine, but I have read that it takes them a little bit longer to cook. Makes the outside of the bean a little bit harder to cook. We definitely want to season before your beans are done because they'll soak it up and it'll get the broth nice and seasoned as well. I highly encourage taste testing. You'll want to make sure it's seasoned to your liking. If there's someone in your family who likes things very spicy and someone else who doesn't, it's nice to have you both try them and make sure it is right to how you like it.
My favorite seasoning to add at the very end, particularly with black beans, is a little bit of balsamic vinegar. It just adds like a little bit of acidity and a little bit of tang that I think is so good. But for some reason, and I don't remember why, but I remember reading that it needed to be added at the end. Maybe for the same reason that you also want to salt kind of closer to the end. Like it just tends to affect the way they cook, I guess.
I have read that as well. So anything acidic you want to add at the end or close to the end. Lemon juice, vinegar, anything like that. You could always add olive oil or something at the beginning. And then with all of the water that you're adding, sometimes they can be a little bit more bland. So I think a really nice way to add some flavor is with stock or veggie or meat broth or bouillon cubes. So I actually had a little cube from work that was a gravy cube, and I added that to my beans, and it was great. So you can really be creative and add whatever you would like. It's a good way to use up anything in your pantry or your fridge. And if you're adding a lot of liquid or broth, tomato paste is a really great way to thicken it and give it a little bit more flavor as well. So we also have on here rind from Parmesan cheese or a chunk of any meat that you've cooked. And that's a really nice way to use less waste.
I grew up in the South where they would call that seasoning meat. And it would just be like pieces of meat that you trimmed off from maybe previous meals that, like maybe you were trimming the fat off a pork chop or you were trimming some gristly pieces off of a piece of meat. You would kind of save those and use those as your seasoning meat when you made a pot of beans, and you would kind of throw it in there and brown it with your onion and maybe garlic and carrots or whatever vegetables you're going to wet in your pan before adding the beans in the water, and then you would just let it simmer in there with the beans, and it would give it such a like meaty flavor, even though there was no actual meat in there. So it's a good way to like really stretch your meat and avoid waste, which is nice. And then meat bones. Often we'll like save meat bones and throw them in the freezer, and then if we're making a pot of beans, we'll throw like a ham bone in there or a bone from a some other cut of meat. And it's surprising how much something like that can flavor the whole pot of beans.
That's a really good idea. Yeah, you can totally be creative with this. Anything you think would be good, probably be good in beans. And fresh beans too, we have seasonally at the co-op. So right now we have organic green beans, and those will be cooked differently than dried beans. But anytime you're in produce and you see something you'd like to cook but you're maybe not sure, just ask anyone who's working. We're happy to help. We love to offer suggestions and maybe our own personal experience on how we've cooked it before. And we're not just there to stock the shelves, but we also really love talking with you guys and sharing our experience. So I have a little bit on here on how to tell if your beans are done. In the picture on the left, it shows how the bean skin is kind of cracked and peeling. And that's exactly what my beans started to look like. And you'll taste them and you can tell if they're still a little crunchy or not. I think that's the best way to tell, is just keep trying them. And the skin will actually curl up a little bit when they're done. I think it probably varies on bean to bean, but on some of the smaller ones I have seen this happen. Make sure to keep seasoning them.
I also think like 30 minutes can make a world of difference. I remember cooking some black beans one time, and it just seemed like they weren't getting done. And every time I tried them, they seemed still really firm, and I was getting impatient. And then just like magically in that, last like 15 to 20 minutes, they totally transform. So don't give up on them. If you're tasting them and it just doesn't seem like they're softening, know that a lot can happen in a short period of time where the texture will suddenly change and get really nice and soft.
That's the same experience I had. I was thinking hour and a half was enough time, and I kept trying them and adding water and adding seasonings, and then all of a sudden they were just done. And you can really tell. So don't settle for crunchy beans. They will get there. So just on how to store them. So once you've cooked them, you might not only have 1 cup of beans left. You'll most likely have 3 cups of beans or even more. So you can put them right in your refrigerator. It's best to do this once the beans have cooled, and try not to keep them out on the counter at room temperature for too long, just to prevent any bacteria and keep them as fresh as possible, just like any food. So cooking the whole package at once, I think, is a great idea because they do take quite a bit of time. Whether you soak them overnight or not, they're still going to take maybe at least an hour to cook. So it's a really nice way to have meals for the whole week. And you don't even need to eat them all that week because you can freeze them. So there's some pictures on the left of freezing them in plastic bags. And that's a really nice way to save space in your freezer. And you can freeze them as a whole bag full, or you can just freeze 1 to 2 cups. However you think you're going to be eating the beans, whether you're having them for just a side dish or you're gonna dump them out, thaw them, and use them in another recipe. It's a convenient way to just pull that out of your freezer and just use what you need. And if you're not freezing the leftover liquid, definitely don't throw it away. It's really delicious, and there's tons of different ways you could add that back into your meals, just like any soup mixture or additional beans and dishes.
I've also read you can water your plants with it. If all else fails, use it to water your plants because it has nutrients in there that your plants like.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
Okay. Just another couple of tidbits. Not to overboil them. Keep it at a low simmer. Bouillon cubes or stock, any seasonings you have. And you could also freeze it in Tupperwares like this. When I cooked my bean dish, I just I refrigerated it. It just kept it out in 3 different containers, so then I had it every day for lunch. It's really good protein, really nice way to add in different ingredients. So, as Emily was asking, how long do they last? So technically, they're not really going to go bad because they're just dried beans. There's nothing really in them that's going to get nasty. But it is good to use them up within a year. Some of the sell-by dates I saw on beans in grocery, for example, were definitely a couple more years. And that was just for dried beans. Some were 2021 and some were 2023. And that's fine, but they will take longer to cook. And I think you had a story where that happened to someone.
My neighbor called me one time in a panic, and she'd been cooking these navy beans for like 5 hours. They were still hard as a rock, and she said, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. My beans are still hard as a rock. And I said, well, how old are they? And she couldn't even remember when she bought them. Like, they'd been in the back of her cabinet for maybe a decade. And so I'm happy to report they eventually got soft, but because they've been around a while, it took them a long time. So I think the freshness matters for cooking time, even if technically they'd still be okay to eat, just plan ahead and know that if they're older than a year, they're probably going to need to cook a little longer.
Mm-hmm. And they're all going to vary a little bit, the cooking time, and it also depends how you want to eat them. If you want them really creamy, or if you're just going to puree them, you might want to cook them a little bit longer. But if it's something you want a little bit of crunch or texture to, like chickpeas on a salad, you might want to cook them a little bit less. So the lentils on this little guide, just for an example, is about 30 to 45 minutes. So that's one of the shorter periods for cooking dried beans. And then a little bit longer, we'll get to cannellini beans and black-eyed peas. They're going to take about 45 minutes to an hour. And then we have Great Northern beans. Those are a little bit bigger. They're going to take a little bit longer. Kidney beans, 60 to 90 minutes. So that's just to plan out a little bit. Dried beans will take a little bit of time for you to cook, but they're going to be really good. And mung beans, a little bit shorter too, about 60 minutes. And those will tend to get creamy just like lentils. So a fun way to use them is pie weights. So in the top right picture, and I think you said you've used
I
them.
tried that with some really old kidney beans that I was afraid to cook.
Yeah,
They became my permanent highway.
it's a great idea. You could do lots of crafts with them as well. And they'll be definitely totally fine to eat. They'll just take a little bit longer to cook. And I like that picture on the bottom of a turkey. So you could do crafts by yourself or with kids or whoever. You could just put them out, glue them to a plate, or you could move them around and just keep trying different designs. Here are some more pictures of different ways to use them. I never would have thought of spray painting beans, but that's a fun way to put succulent in them or anything you would like. And then for lawn games, you could make your own bean bags. I've also seen making a draft stopper for under your door. If you have some old beans that you're not sure what to do with, you could sew them up in a bag and put it in front of your door to stop the cold. And it's a good way to use up those lost socks too, if you want to make your own bean bag or a neck warmer. That's a good idea.
Those to warm them up and then lay it around you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Those can be pretty expensive if you buy them at the store. So now you can make your own pot of beans and have a neck warmer while you're waiting. All right. And then I was just curious if you guys had any questions or wanted to share any recipes that you have really liked or anything else you wanted to talk about.
One thing I wanted to share is that even though beans take a long time to cook, once you get them going, like once you get your beans simmering on the stove and, for the long haul of the cooking, they don't need a lot of attention. And so I like that I can start a pot of beans and then go and work on other things and just check on them every half hour or so. And so I would encourage you to not be too intimidated by the long cook time, because you won't be actually tied to your stove that whole time. You'll be able to just come in and, check on them every half hour or so, have them simmering low and slow. If you have one of those wood stoves that allows you to put a pot right on your wood stove, it's the perfect way to cook beans in the wintertime, because it's just going to simmer them low and slow all day, and it'll make your house smell really good. And so yeah, that would be my big takeaway is don't let the long cooking time be a deterrent. Think of it as an opportunity to have your food bubbling away in your home while you're doing laundry and cleaning and doing other things.
That's very true. That's what I was worried about as well, trying to determine what to do while my beans were cooking late at night, and I realized I don't have to.
Marianne mentions that she has an Instapot that she uses to cook her beans.
I've heard about those.
It's a great way to shave a lot of cooking time off of those beans. How fast, Marianne, are you able to do a pot of beans on average in your Instapot?
Those are very popular. That's a good idea.
She says 20 minutes.
Wow.
Maybe that could be our next class, cooking beans with an Instapot.
We have one coworker in particular who uses her Instapot for everything. And it's very, yes. And she tells us all how quickly she's made meals and can experiment with a lot of different things. But it is a nice, it smells really good. It's a fun way to experiment, and if you think you've added something that you don't like, you can always fix it, because it's easy to season, easy to add different ingredients, and it's fun.
I also love how easy they are to stretch into a lot of different meals. Like, as I mentioned at the beginning, putting them over rice one night, having them in burritos another night, having them as a side dish on the third night, or pureeing what little you have left and using it as a bean dip. Like, you can take one pot of beans that you spent a couple of hours on your day off and turn it into 3 or 4 night meals or a couple of meals and a snack. And in that way, it also really helps with that time factor. You're spending a lot of time up front making them, but you're able to stretch them really far. And it's just because they're so versatile.
That's a good idea. I didn't have a slide on that, but I forgot to mention all the different ways you could use beans once you've cooked them. So, for example, looking at pinto beans, that's a fun one to make refried beans. And then you can do tacos, quesadillas. You can add really any bean to a quesadilla, meat or vegetarian. If you ever made avocado toast and you wanted a little bit more protein, you could put some beans on top of that. You could make your own baked beans. What else do I have on here? Oh, a 4-bean salad.
Oh, yeah, I forget about eating them cold.
Yeah.
They don't have to be warm.
And that's something I've forgotten about until recently. Someone asked me if we had salad beans. I was really confused what those were, and I realized that's just a can of beans all ready for a 4-bean salad. So you could make your own, and that would be a really nice gift idea too, to give someone a can of beans all ready for a 4-bean salad. You could make breakfast burritos with your beans, any sort of soup. And then another fun thing I found online was if you're sick of creamy beans or having like, not mushy, but soft beans in any of your recipes, you can put them on a little skillet with olive oil and seasonings, and you can make them like crispy little croutons for the top of your salad. Or in any sort of food, it'll just give it a little extra crunch, and they're already cooked all the way through, so just make the outside a little bit crispier. And chickpeas, you can roast them and eat those as a snack. One of my favorite things right now in our snack aisle is actually these spicy roasted whole green peas. And they're delicious and addictive, and they're just peas, but they're roasted all the way down, and they're crispy. So that's a really fun way to eat them I've never tried before.
Our instructor for our very first class of this co-op class series, he was teaching a class on sprouting seeds and sprouting beans and eating the sprouts. But one of the things he mentioned was that his family doesn't necessarily love hummus. Like hummus is made by pureeing chickpeas with tahini and spices. But what his family really loved using black beans, like having the rest of the recipe be pretty much the same as the normal hummus, but using black beans instead of chickpeas, and they called it hummus. Which he had a little daughter who was 3, and he said she loved calling it hummus. It would always make her giggle.
That's a great idea. Yeah, you could make your own hummus. Another thing that I forgot about that I love is making bean burgers. I found a recipe for zucchini, chickpea bean fritters, which is very similar, but a smaller. You make it into like a little patty, and then you can fry it or oven bake it. But black bean burgers are really good. You can make, I see you nodding, you agree? Black bean and quinoa burgers we used to sell at the co-op. You can add your own spices to those. You can really mix it up. So there's tons of different ways you can use them.
Anybody have any questions that we didn't cover tonight so far? I think your dad's talking, but I can't hear him. There we go.
Feel free to unmute if you have anything you want to. Oh,
there we go.
She's talking to you.
Oh, I'm my question.
We can hear you now.
You guys grew beans this year for the first time, right?
Talking to you.
We've grown shell beans and harvested them and used them to make chili and other things ourselves.
That's a good idea. And you had a couple different beans you put in the chili, right?
Yes. And the nice thing about growing and using your own dry beans is it lowers the sodium amount. And you know exactly, you also can make them softer or harder than the canned beans, which is per your preference.
And it's something to be really proud of too. You grew the beans, and here you've cooked a really nice home meal for everyone. So.
And then, like what Emily said, the cooking of the bean, you're doing everything else, cutting up the tomatoes, the garlic, the onions, and breaking it all down. So it isn't like any added extra time.
That's great.
I'm so grateful that all of you came tonight. I really appreciate you coming, and I'll be sure to email you that handy bean guide that Emily mentioned. In fact, I'll send it to you as soon as we conclude.
Thank
And if
you.
you think of any questions after your class, feel free to reach out to Emily or myself. We're both Emily's at the co-op. It's easy to find us. And we'd be happy to answer any burning bean questions. Thanks for coming. Emily.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Super fun. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Emily and Emily.